should women's sport be played the same as men's sport? If we're going to change the rules in terms of how you market it, you're going to try and change how you content, the type of content distribution to make it, to make it more different. Because do you change the rules of women's sport? Do you lower the nets so you get more slam dunks in basketball? Do you shorten the game of football? Do you, do you make the pitches smaller?
It might just too much change for me.
Welcome to The Attention Shift, a podcast where sports media gets debated like a VAR decision, passionately, longer than it should, and with none of us fully agreeing on the outcome. Look, there's been a 10% decline in attendance of people watching women's football. Is that a worry for women's sports in general? And is it a shift that is showing a decline?
Isn't all the narrative around how successful it is, though, and how revenues are going through the roof?
It is. And I think
what's going on in stadiums, Lee?
What's going on? Well, look, I can give you some facts. I think that will help maybe set the scene. So, look, 1.8 billion in revenue projected in women's sports for 2025. But the attendance in the sort of women's Premier League, or Women's Super League, as it's formerly called, has declined by 10%. And there's some big clubs for that. There's a couple of big reasons. So one, last season, Bristol City got relegated. Their average attendance was 6,974 people, whereas they were replaced by Crystal Palace, whose average attendance is 1,779. The other sort of big call outs here are Aston Villa and Man United saw their biggest decreases, 33% down on people attending. But there is some positives, I would say. Arsenal is obviously still smashing it in terms of numbers. In terms of, obviously they do a lot at the Emirates. Another club's growth, which was helped. So Liverpool up 54%, helped by hosting games at Anfield. And Tottenham also up 24%. So look, I think there's lots of money, as we know, in women's sports, as clearly it's there. But I do worry, is there a fear with going down? Is this a sign of a game in decline, or a worrying metric if you're investing in women's sports that people aren't showing up?
I think the sample size is just too small, to be honest, to extrapolate anything from that. And I think if you look at, Arsenal have announced now, I think they're going to play all their games at the Emirates in the season that's about to come. Like you said, you get certain teams come up and certain teams come down. I think the reality is, look, the men's game has been around for 140 years now, and the women's game, I know, has been around a while, but it's not had the attention that it's getting now, right? It's only in the last 10, 15 years, and even in the last 5 years where you're really starting to see not just the investment round, but the attention that people are starting to look at the women's game and say, no, you know what, this is a viable game. This is a game that people will pay to go watch. And similarly, look, I'm not going to keep going on about Burnley. I'm not a Man United fan. But last season, I went with my wife and daughter. Man United were playing at Old Trafford against West Ham. And I think there was 35,000 there for that game. And
do you think playing it in the stadium where the men's game's played has an effect then?
It made us go, to be honest, because we thought, great, because I think they play in Lee Sports Village normally. I could be wrong. Yeah. Which is not far away. But it made us go. It feels like
more of an event.
Yeah, it made us go. We thought, let's go along. And look, and it was a different experience. There was a fan zone there as well. Yeah. To be honest, we'd been to see the Women's Euros at Old Trafford as well, and we enjoyed it. Yeah, so it's different, right? But we went along, and I remember just walking around, and it was amazing seeing families and dads saying, God, this is a completely different experience to going to the men's game, because I feel safe. I'm not having to worry about any idiots. And he did. It felt like a really fun, and we were right next to the band as well, which my daughter loved. Yeah. A bit noisy throughout the game, but it just felt like a completely different experience. And I think, having never been to a game before myself and always going and watching men's football, not knowing what to expect, I just realised that it's not going to be the same as that. It's a different thing. And when you get your head around that, it's fine. And it's a bit like
I remember
we did men's in 100, right? And we've done that as well.
I remember hearing Tammy Parler speak, actually, and I think she chair of Women in Sport, and she was, I'm probably going to reference it wrong, but they'd done some analysis around attendance for Arsenal women's games. And they were saying that the crowd, to your point, much more family type of attending.
Less visceral,
but also tended to turn up a lot earlier than for the men's game, and then spent
a day out.
Spent a load more on food and beverage. So a completely different way of experiencing football than obviously the men's game. I'm interested to, I mean, playing it at Anfield, yeah, I get it, or at the Emirates, but does that then put pressure on fixture scheduling? Because then if it starts just nudging it into awkward times, that's going to hold it back as well.
Yeah,
right?
and they get shunted around in the schedule because the men's game comes first.
Yeah,
but I think
which makes it hard.
And obviously mentioned Arsenal, then Everton next season, the women's team are going to play at Goodison, and they haven't shut the upper parts of it because leaving it open would be cavernous.
Yeah.
It just needs time to develop, and I think, like I say, those I wouldn't, like I said, the attendance thing I wouldn't massively.
I think it does make a difference. Like the women's, I think it's the League Cup final, which Chelsea versus Man City, wasn't held at Wembley, and it was, I think it's Derby's County, which is 33.5 out, over. But, right. And the attendance of that was just over 14,000. Now, if that was Wembley, you see it when the Lionesses play. They feel they do a good job of filling the stadium. So I think that does make an impact, and that's one big driver from the stats, which was why Anfield made such a big difference to this. If attendance, I think we all agree that having people, we remember COVID and watching sports where there was no attendance, and you do need some level of atmosphere. So I think you have to have whether it's a full stadium, arguably that maybe you might not get that. But what does that mean then for viewership overall? And I think we've talked about viewership generally and looking at different platforms. There's a big deal that happened with Sky. They've just signed a 5-year deal. It's another 65 million, and about 60 million of that's going on to production and other services. I think what does that mean in terms of the commitment? I guess showing the commitment from Sky, but also what's it mean in terms of viewership? We talk about the attention and engaging younger fans. Doing a deal with Sky, how does that resonate?
Yeah, I was so heartened when it went on YouTube.
Yeah.
When you could go on to the Barclays Women's Super League channel and you could see all of the games on there, just because that opens it up to all of that addressable audience. We talk about the attention shift. We talk about how younger audiences are social first, and now it almost feels like it's reverted to type, because they've taken the money, they've done a deal, and they're putting it on Sky and some games on the BBC. So it's shrinking that potential pool again. And that makes me a little bit sad. I know monetization is really hard on YouTube. It's not really clear yet. But it felt like it was such a good start. I think you made a good point. I mean, it looked like they were committed. I got really excited. It looked like they were committed to YouTube, and they've done it for one season.
Yeah, and look, and we were talking about this off camera as well, weren't they, as well, like, should live games that are produced for mass consumption on linear just be put on YouTube as they are anyway? And when we
there's an argument that it doesn't necessarily translate.
It tripled their viewing figures, right?
But did it help them to get that next step? And look, and Sky have talked about themselves, right? Like, look, they're investing in the women's game at a level that no one else is investing in the women's game. And they've done that with other sports before as well. Like, if you look at, what they've done with darts, they started out with darts when darts was a pub game, and stuck with it for a long, long time. And they've, BBC and Sky together, they'll say that they've actually helped each other to grow, and it's one of the most popular sports now. What's to say that Sky can't do a similar thing for women's football over a long period of time?
They're still going to put it up. They said they're going to still put the championship on all the live games in championship, and then the other argument.
That'll be really interesting.
Yeah, big teams coming through the championship now, and some big big clubs. Sorry, like, because obviously the women's team won't be as big as the men's, but they're coming from a club that have got big followings, and can they transition from the men's game to the women's game? But these teams coming out now through the north and the south, which is the third tier, who now, the women's game is growing. I know, like I said, Burnley, I know are going professional next season as well, because they're making a real push to try and get into the second tier, which will become WS2. You'll see this natural, unfortunately, these teams from yesteryear, like Doncaster Bells and stuff like that, who were the trailblazers, who, unfortunately, the reality is these big clubs come in and it pushes them down a bit. But I guess that's part of the evolution of the game. It's sad in a lot of ways, but the game's evolving all the time. But, again, you look at some of the players now who play the women's game and who are earning real livings out of it, going and playing in different countries. You couldn't do that 10 years ago. It happened a bit, but...
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't support yourself.
No.
That point you made about putting live games on YouTube is interesting, though, because I've often argued that actually the live product is not what is valuable on YouTube. Yeah. It's the other stuff around it. We know it's that
the story,
in and around it.
So whilst I think it's a shame that they've gone from putting live games on YouTube to doing this deal with Sky Sports, I accepting all your arguments. Does that mean that they're still going to create content, bespoke content that's going to sit on YouTube for those social first fans, for that whole generation for whom they go to YouTube?
Does it put more ownership or responsibility on the players to create their own content? Because a lot of these players are very good at, if you take outside, rugby, Black Ferns, Ruby Tui, she's probably the most popular people on TikTok. There's a lot of creators who...
Mayor as well.
Exactly. Amazing.
Does it put the responsibility to them, and do they have the freedom to enable them to do that? Because that's the thing, right? That's going to build the fandom.
There's a few podcasts I've popped on now, female football podcasts, right? That and I can't remember if there's 2 or 3 now, and I know for a fact that they've been created because brands are saying there are no female sports personalities that we can really get behind. It won't do the same numbers, but the brands feel like it cuts through in a way that the men's game doesn't, so they're willing to invest in it, which ultimately then helps give that leg up to so these lionesses are now becoming creators, and hopefully that's the start. I don't think what we're seeing a lot of is actual creators starting in the bedroom from a female's perspective in and around sports that are getting real traction, and I don't know what that is. I don't know whether it's because
in general there don't tend to be as many, even across games as well. There's
men can be a bit more shock jock about it and a bit more extreme, and women tend to not do that.
Yeah, do you know what? I don't know. And I do see, but I do think it will happen. I just think it'll be slower. But you see in gaming, there are some huge female gaming creators. There are many more men, but there are some really big gaming creators.
Is that because
that
of
are females?
the challenges they get
back? Come through.
Yeah, is that because of the challenges they get facing being a woman,
very often,
being a woman creator, and the comments you may get, and
there might even be bias in the algorithm. I'm sure Google and YouTube have never acknowledge that, but it could be inherent in it. Who knows? But I do think that particularly now, the WSL is going to Sky Sports again. That's why Mark Goldbridge became Mark Goldbridge. Yeah. So where's the female version of him then? If it is behind a paywall, who's going to be the creator that's going to do that watch along or the alt commentary for younger audiences in the absence of it now being available on YouTube?
Well, you've also got Champions League right now, Women's Champions League on Disney Plus. So that's a big deal. And is that going to help? Because arguably Disney is tailored for a family-based audience. They've got the reach, they've got the time. People, they've got the time, they've got the effort they can put into this, and you could do some very clever collaborations with Disney characters and really do some enablements of this.
Do you think you'll do it though?
No.
I don't either.
I think that's the shame, right?
I think they've looked at it and probably, it's relatively cheap right for them to start doing something live in sports on Disney Plus. Yeah. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but they don't really do that. They're more like Amazon been doing what they've been doing, Netflix been doing what they've been doing. It's kind of like, me too. They need to do something right, and they're starting there, and it's a starting point, which is great for the women's game that they've chosen that as a starting point.
But generally, you see a big
call-ups though.
We're wrong. We've reverted to type and gone for football as the biggest.
Yeah.
But we should just talk about other sports. I mean,
women's rugby.
Women's rugby, and when Ilona Mayer came across to play for Bristol Bears for that stint. I don't really watch rugby at all. I started watching rugby on YouTube. I didn't
even know Bristol had a team.
Yeah. And they had to move to a bigger stadium. Yeah. We're talking about stadium attendance in decline. That was going the opposite way. They had to move to a bigger stadium. Yeah. I watched one game on YouTube where she was playing. And as I do, I had the comments scrolling, reading the comments. What was brilliant about it, and I was sending screen recordings and screen grabs to people that I know. I sent one to Roger Mitchell. It was... The commentator was commentating in a very considered way, intentionally, being a bit more explanatory. And then it started coming through in the comments. I'm watching from X country or this. I don't really understand rugby, but they were there because of Ilona Mayer. Yeah. But they were going, this commentator's great, because now I'm beginning to understand it. Yeah. It was brilliant because it was a masterclass in something being on YouTube, actually they were driven to YouTube because of that one athlete / creator.
Which is what you need sometimes,
Creator first.
The brilliance of the commentating team to acknowledge that they were going to be getting a lot of newbies there. So changing the commentary style accordingly. And then just seeing the immediate response.
Yeah.
I'm interested in this. Yeah. I'm understanding it more. I'm here because of Ilona Meyer, and now I know Bristol Bears. And they were watching from Morocco or wherever. Yeah. It was brilliant. So I wish there was more of that.
You get that instant feedback, though. That's the great thing about something like YouTube, is you get the comments so you can see it's resonating.
That's why it works so well for creators, because they can instantly change how they're doing things. I always joke about it's almost like that QVC model. If it's selling, keep selling it, and if it's not selling, I'll move on to the next product or change it up. And they're usually savvy and clever enough to be able to do that. So I think that's why it really, really suits. And look, I think the reality is there's always that world of coming back to like, what is WSL going to do? We'll come back away from football in a sec. Like, it's okay, so it's going on Sky now, so there's lots of opportunities. Like, they've built, they've got close to 300,000 subscribers now on YouTube. But how do you continue to build that? Looking earlier, there's lots of content on there. Look, the live games, some were 250,000, some were like 10,000 viewership, right? It depends on the team. I think there's lots of other content opportunities around that. There will be players now that, some of the players who've retired, who were at the top of the game, are doing Sky and the BBC and stuff like that. But there's plenty of others who are not. I think some will pop up and start going, I could start creating content in and around this. And
I'd be.
And then I'm like, okay, so if they create their own creator channels, that's where the WSL needs to be partnering with them and giving them access and doing things that linear won't do, because the scheduling is just
allowing them to curate some of the content. It's what the NBA
does, behind the scenes.
The NBA has done. That opened up 2,500 hours of live footage per season.
I mean, they've done a deal.
Creators.
They did the NBA team, the New York NBA team did a deal with Pinterest, and that was all about specifically around lifestyle creating. It had huge impact, huge numbers and huge conversions off the back of that.
Right. Do you think part of the issue then is that women's sport doesn't really know how to market itself, or those involved in it have come from the men's game and are still using an old playbook?
Well, I'm going to take it one step further and ask the controversial question that everyone always asks: should women's sport be played the same as men's sport? If we're going to change the rules in terms of how you market it, you're going to try and change how you content, the type of content distribution to make it to make it more different, because do you change the rules of the sport?
Look at what Baller League has done.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to refer to Roger Mitchell, who once said, make them 30-minute halves. Change it up. There's no reason that it has to be a carbon copy. Yeah. It could be consumed in a different way. Now would be the time to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Do you lower the nets so you get more slam dunks in basketball? Do you shorten the game of football? Do you do you make the pitches smaller?
Might just too much change for me.
I think is that the question? Are we trying to? And is that part of the problem?
Shoehorn it into
a box. We always
compare. Are we expecting too much too soon? And we just need to let it's growing. It's growing really, really fast.
But sport doesn't tend to be a patient industry, does it?
No.
If there's one thing I've learned in my short career in sport, it's not very patient.
It doesn't mean very.
I mean, look, and it's really, really hard to do this, but I love what the 100's done, where you get a women's game and a men's game on the same day. And I know it's cricket and it's not the same as football and you're moving fans in and out, but is there a world where if you have got a men's game, you could have a women's game the same day?
That's really smart. That's really smart.
And look, you're not going to get the same attendance rate. It's kind of like you get both. Now, look, the challenge you've got is that the Premier League or the Football League is separate from the Women's League, right? And I still don't understand for the life of me why, in a lot of ways, the Premier League didn't take on the Women's Premier League as the WSL. It became one entity, because then you would have had the whole juggernaut working together from a media rights perspective, from a marketing perspective. I know the element of the women's game is the women's game. We want our own game. That might have grown it faster.
Yeah.
And we'll never know, right? Because the horse is bolted on that. But that idea, could you do it? Could you stage it the same day in the same stadium? Is it possible? And there'll be loads of people tell me it's not because of pictures.
Well, I'm sure there's a million reasons, but I really like that, like they've done with the 100. I just think it's a really smart.
It's a really good model.
Because again, you talk about there's so much sport content out there. How does women's sport even hope to get a share of voice when there's so much sport? Well, if you put it together, and again, I mean, we're talking about the attention shift. We talk very often people say attention spans have shortened. They haven't. It's interest spans. If you can extend interest, then you extend attention. Well, that is exactly how I would do it. Extend interest because you've got 2 games. Put a concert in the middle.
It might not be every club, right? But clubs that do own the men's and the women's team, even though they're playing in different leagues, could in theory be in control of that situation and say, like, my team, Burnley, could in theory say, we'll have a women's game and the same day we'll have a men's game, because they are in control of both sides. Whether the leagues will want them to remains to be seen. Yeah. But it's doable and it's possible. And I'm sure there's a million reasons that someone will tell me that they can't do that. But
I think that's a smart idea.
Yeah, but is that the, we talk about, like we said, the attention shift and engaging younger fans and audiences. And we talked about previously about, football and super fans getting older and aging out. And, you've got these arguably new, although the women's game's been around for a while, but these newer professional leagues, these newer investments, you're trying to grow the audience base. Is that they have the advantage right now? And I think that's, when we start this off, we're saying, does attendance, lowering of attendance concern? Now, arguably, they will probably get a bump from the big Euros.
So
the things
we're worried about that, without a doubt.
Yeah, and you do, and also it was the season without a Euros. We've got the Euros coming up, so it'd be interesting to see if there'll probably be a bump next season, right?
That's when we've won the Champions League as well. Is that going to have a halo effect for the league as well? Because that's a suggestion that, okay, then the Women's Super League now is competing at the top table.
But is it, and that's the question, right? Do we need... That's why I asked the controversial question everyone asks is like, do we need it in a different format? Because we're trying to target people in a different way. Yeah. And we're trying to engage people. They have an advantage at the moment, right? I think we've all invested. They've got eyes, as in money, people looking to invest. There's a lot of money that's, even from Sky, £65 million is a lot. And yes, we may say that we want to grow on YouTube, and actually, is it making it more sustainable to grow your fan base first rather than going for the big money?
But not only that, wealthy investors investing in the teams as well, obviously. Serena and her husband have invested in
Alexis,
right?
Yeah, Hanian. Yeah. 200 million.
Yeah. So there's also a reason that they've done that, they believe in the...
And Angel City as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they're massive, right?
Yeah. But what's interesting is Willow Bay, the wife of Bob Iger, who runs Disney, who are masters of building brands and franchises. And I do think that when you look at them, again, we've spoken before about how sports in America is very much treated as a media business, less so over here. That Angel City FC will be treated as an entertainment media franchise.
I think the one thing you've got with female sports personalities compared to male sports personalities is, certainly in European sports, females tend to have more personality than like the men end up being media trained, scared of saying anything. Because potentially say something slightly out of turn, everyone piles on. I'm seeing more and more now with like the Millie Brights and people like that they're quite happy to say when they're having issues and talk about it openly and talk about what they do in their personal lives, and they're not afraid what
that makes
people
might
say. Look, and I know I've got no doubt they get tons of abuse and noise around it.
They do, yeah.
But you whenever you hear them talk, there's a real sort of sense of confidence about a lot of the female sports personalities, and I think that they generally have very interesting sort of private lives that they're quite happy to share and talk about their interests.
Yeah, they're much more.
I think that's where if they can lean into the culture.
Not been managed out of them like.
No, I think if they lean into their culture and their lifestyle in a way that men's games generally don't.
I mean, I look at Coco Gauff, and again, I look at her because she's a mad anime fan, and she every once in a while she comes out in a tennis kit that's inspired by Sailor Moon, and it's just brilliant. But again, there was I was watching her on TikTok last week after her win at, was it the US Open or but anyway, she
French. Yes.
It was French. She she basically went to all the ball boys and girls and she took her trophy and just
they got the photo,
a big selfie. And I don't feel like you see that as much from male athletes.
Actually, Alcaraz did it.
I did.
Yeah.
Alcaraz, he went with all the boys
and
and girls, and he celebrated with all, because they're probably closer to his age than most of the people that's on the tour. He's a young guy, right? But yeah, you're right. Like this, I think this almost feels like the more liberated to do more things, and
just more authentic, more accessible.
I think that is an opportunity for women's sports in general. Again, not hampered by the legacy kind of shackles, everything that over those 140 years in football or in established men's sports have just been there shaping it, squashing it. You know, you do this, you don't do that. It's this kind of very formulaic way that you grow.
But ultimately, you
as
need
a
return
men's
on money,
sport
right? That's that ultimately, and I think that's the question. Is like, you know, where they say this is massive opportunity. You know, what do they say? 1.5 billion women's sports in 2025. You know, that's why things like attendance are going down. That's revenue, right? There's not many places a club can make revenue, right? You've got media rights deals, hence why they always try and do it. You know, although we advocate YouTube,
What,
you know,
what could replace attendance though?
well, that's it, isn't it?
Or is attendance still
Well, I think it's
a significant enough
it's
revenue driver that there has to be a focus on?
three big things that make money for a club, right? They're only real free revenue drivers for a club. It's people turning up for match day, it's media deals, and it's commerce, right? So that's people buying shirts, people buying stuff. That's it, right?
Yeah.
They are your only
That's
real
a massive
free
opportunity
drivers.
for women's sports.
And that's why I think you're right. There's a massive opportunity with the commerce and the collabs and telling the authentic stories and doing all the right stuff.
How much merch women buy through TikTok Shop.
Yeah.
That's a massive opportunity in women's sports, in my view. And Roblox. I mean, we've not even touched on Roblox yet.
That's an episode in itself.
Yeah. But the amount of, you know, women's sport massively under leveraged on Roblox. It's an economy in and of itself. Massive potential to develop a commerce and e-com play from Roblox, which I think, again, if women's sport embraced it, they'd be way out ahead.
And that's what they have to do, right? Like, that is the opportunity, because ultimately, like, you know, all this money that's going to be invested, and there's a lot of money at the start, you know, the returns are, you know, if you're an investor, the returns are low at the moment, right? So you have to look at this as this sustainable, you know, strategic view. Like, this is it's not going to happen in 3 years, it's not going to happen in 5 years, it's going to be a 10, 20-year play.
Do you think the investors are that patient then?
No, well, that's the question, right? So that's...
I think they will be. I mean, the rights deal is what, 5-year deal as well.
That was a 5-year deal,
I think
yeah.
because it's only the last year that they've effectively reconstituted the league and created as a new co. I think, like Lauren was saying earlier about how like this sample size was too small on census, I think you'll have to look at it over a 5-year period to see if what they've done has been a success. I think it'll be just too hard to say whether what they're doing is right or wrong.
So when you see declines in attendance, are we panicking over nothing then?
Well,
I think there's lots like
metric,
I think there's lots of movement in there as well. That like I said, next year now you'll see with Arsenal playing at the Emirates more often, and Arsenal obviously are probably one of the that are really pushing into the women's game. That will bump up the attendances, so you might see a big increase next season because of that, and
the Euros
and the Euros as well. And you always get that halo effect going into it. So to wrap this up, then conclusions. What is your viewpoint on this? Then do you think that is a worry for you in terms of their attendances? But also, is there one thing you think they should be doing in terms of to increase the scale of the women's game?
Yeah, I think. Well, look, I think it's definitely a signal that says, without having a major tournament, whether it's a Euros or a World Cup, there is how bad does that halo effect have? 10% grand scheme of things is not really that bad, right? But ultimately, if you want to increase the attendance, you have to play in the best stadiums, right? You have to play. It shouldn't just be in these sort of, and that's a scheduling thing, right? As part of that. But I think, if you, like we said, that we use 100 a lot because I think it is a great example. I think there are good examples of people doing some good stuff out there in terms of making these events. And I think
events. But there's so many other calls on your time.
Exactly. It's got to be a day out, right? And it's got to be accessible. It's got to be cheap enough to take a family out, in this day and age where cost of living's a crisis and things are expensive. Like, it's got to be accessible, it's got to be cheap. You make it a day out. But I also think, like we talked about earlier, you've got to play on the story. The athletes themselves, they want to, there's a lot of emphasis on them to create their own content and be more, they already do. We've talked about some great examples, but I think more of that. It's not more of that. Looking at the clubs, looking at other monetization opportunities, which is, if it's not going to be match day attendance, then we talked about it's going to be commerce. Then you need your players. You need to look at these sort of shoppings, experiences, and collabs. But I think that's it. I think you made a really good point. It's still, the sample size is too small to really make a real impact.
And I think, aside from like the attendances and what clubs are doing on match days as well, I think from a content perspective now, I think there's an opportunity here now. Look, Sky will do a really good job of how they'll produce and distribute the women's game, right? And I know that they'll, their digital team will do a really good job in terms of highlights and what they do with all of that. I think what you have got now is the clubs and the league itself has to step up with the content in and around the games themselves.
Completely.
And really lean into
invest in it.
Really lean into the personalities, the players in the sport.
And YouTube native content.
Exactly. And distribute via their own
and support
channels as well.
And support women creators.
And support, exactly. And find some women's creators that can be modern day commentators on the game itself. I mean, obviously we're talking a lot about football here as well, and the same applies to any of the sports, right? And I think, like I said, rugby had its day with Alona Mayer as well, and hopefully they're going to do more things like that. Cricket as well, you can see it growing all the time, and I know that the ECB have invested heavily in making sure that the women's game has real support and some kind of parity. It's happening more and more now, and I know for one, father of a teenage daughter, if she was that way inclined in terms of wanting to play professional sport, there'd be opportunities now that weren't there 15, 20 years ago, right? What do you think, Joe?
Same. I think it's a mixture of things. I do think it needs to be marketed in a different way. I don't think that cheapens it or sullies it. I think it just needs a different approach, and there's an opportunity to do it. I think, to your point, I think particularly on platforms like YouTube and TikTok, it's a completely different media experience. And that should be allowed to find its own audience there, using creators, using athletes. And I do think, even if the actual live product stays the same, maybe wrap it up in a different way. That I love that 100 double headers, men's and women's. That would be brilliant. That would make me want to go and stay a whole day and watch both games. So I think there's just an opportunity. I think it just needs a bit of courage. It's time to be
bold.
A bit braver.
Be bold, be brave, and target the right audiences like they're doing.
So if anyone thinks that's a really bad idea, also we've got an email address. Hello,
email Ed.
Media. It was me who said it. So email me and abuse me for that. But thank you both of you. That's it for today's episode of The Attention Shift. Remember to like and subscribe, and listen in next time. Like I said, if you do want to let us know what you think, totally disagree with what we're saying, or have any suggestions of things you'd like us to talk about, you can email us at hello@attentionshift.media. That's hello@attentionshift.media. I've been Ed Abbis.
I've been Lee Rabborn.
And I'm Joe Redfern.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Cheers. That's it for this episode of The Attention Shift. Remember to like and subscribe and listen in next time. And do let us know what you think. Email us at hello@attentionshift.media. So that's hello@attentionshift.media.